So I think we're ready to go here. Let's think about the name text box. The name text box is going to have a required field validator, and I'm going to drag the required field validator onto the right-hand column of the HTML table. And this is quite a common arrangement. You set up an HTML table where the first column contains labels, and the middle column contains text boxes, and the right-hand side column contains validators. And the validators will display error messages at this point. So let's select the required field validator, and let's have a look at the properties that we need to set. Well, just like every control, let's just make this a bit bigger. Just like every control, probably the first thing you want to do is to set the ID. So I'm going to adopt the naming convention here that the validator control will be called name required field validator. Just make it a bit bigger again so you can see it more clearly. So the ID for this validator is name required field validator because it's the required field validator for the name text box. You can also set some aesthetic properties if you want. So for example, you could set the background color, and that would govern the background color for the error messages that get displayed here. I'm not going to bother doing that. One thing you have got to set is the control to validate. Obviously, the validator needs to know which control it's associated with, and each validator validates one control. So if you click the drop down here, you can choose which of these various controls you want to validate. Name text box. So our validator will be validating the name text box. Let's have a look at some of the other properties we can set. There's a display property. The display property can be static or dynamic. I'll choose dynamic, and then later on we'll see what happens if you choose static. The next property, enable client script. You'll probably want to set this to true. This enables ASP.NET to inject client-side JavaScript into the HTML page that it returns to the browser so that the HTML page can perform client-side validation as well as server-side validation. So the benefits of client-side validation are generally a better experience for the user because as soon as they enter an invalid value, the client-side browser immediately flags up the error without requiring a postback to the server. So the user gets the error information more quickly, and it places less network load on our network. So generally speaking, you will want to enable client script. But you could disable it if you wanted to. And one thing to bear in mind as well, some users disable JavaScript in their browsers. So this is only an option in addition to server-side validation. Okay, if we move on, we have a property called error message. Now the error message will be used by the validation summary control if it displays error information at the bottom of the page. So let's choose a suitable message here, such as name required. And also another property you might want to set focus on error, so that if the user does enter some invalid text or the validation fails, then it will return the input cursor to the control that's being validated so the user can immediately correct their error. Now the text property is the text that will actually appear at the point where you've put the validator control. So for now, we'll just leave that as the same as the error message, name required. Okay, so there we are. There's another property called validation group. I'm going to explain how that works at the end of this lesson, so we'll just skip over that for now. Righty-ho, let's run the application, Control F5, and see if the name validation works so far. So I'll type in a value for the name, Andy, and then I'll cursor into the next text field. So it clearly thinks that that's valid. If I delete it, and then attempt to move into a different text field, at this point, we've performed validation. This validation has occurred at the client. There was no postback to the server involved, but clearly it indicates that we have to enter a name in this field. So that's very helpful.